Little House is huge in other countries because people can relate. You have a family, doesn't have a lot of money. They're living in a small house with a lot of kids. There's a rich family in town who are always giving them a hard time. And they're not sure where their next meal is coming from. This is how most people are living. They're not living like Dallas and Dynasty and all those shows.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're all having a wonderful day today. My name is Talal, and you're listening to the Popcorn and Soda Podcast, the show where we discuss all things movies, pop culture, and so much more. I want to thank each and every one of you for making me a small part of your day. On today's show, we're joined by a very special guest. You know her as Nellie Oleson, the original Mean Girl, in the iconic pop culture drama Little House on the Prairie, a show that continues to air worldwide and has inspired millions of creative artists. She's a New York Times bestseller for her autobiography, Confessions of a Prairie Bitch, How I Survived Nellie Oleson and Learned to Love Being Hated. She's a comedian, a one-woman tour de force on the stage, and a philanthropist. On the show today, the very talented Alison Arngrim. How are you, Alison?
I am excellent. What a lovely introduction. Thank you. Thank you. And it is so amazing to me and everyone from the show that Little House on the Prairie is now a pop culture cult classic, that's like even a designation that we would live long enough to see. So thank you.
No, my pleasure. And thank you so much for being a guest on the show today.
Thank you.
How have you been over the last 2 years, Alison? We're living in this ever-changing world, especially for someone in the creative arts. What have the last 2 years looked like for you?
Bananas. I've done really well. I am so lucky. I'm always been kind of a hit the ground running, adaptable. Well, okay, what's happening now? I guess we have to figure out how to survive this now. I mean, that's why my book has, Survive, Nellie Oleson. I'm one of those people who survived sort of everything. My husband Bob and I, we met actually, AIDS Project Los Angeles back in the 80s. So as we sat on the couch and turned on the news and saw what was happening, and we said, it's not our first plague. We can do this. So we said, there was another pandemic and we were on the hotline and working that. So I was initially horrified because, of course, everything I did was canceled. All my work was on stage. I had a play and my one-woman show and stand-up and personal appearances and fan autograph things, all which involved contact with people. And, of course, that went right out the window immediately. The whole year was canceled. Trip to France, everything. And I was sort of freaked out. And I was sitting in the middle of the floor with all the photos and books I'd ordered for the next autograph show that were going nowhere. And I said, what am I going to do? And my husband said, you'll think of something. You always think of something. And at first I said, oh, yeah, you're a lot of help. And then I did. And that's when I started doing the readings of the Little House books on Facebook Live, which I initially did because I said, I'm going to take my time. I'm going to go back and reread the Little House books. That'll be fun. And then I said, well, what the heck? Everybody else is stuck at home too. Well, I'll go on Facebook. We'll all do it together. And it became such a hit. So many people were home and they really enjoyed having me read the Little House on the Prairie books from the beginning, chapter 1, Little House on the Big Woods. And now I have read all of them. Oh, The Wizard of Oz, Anne of Green Gables, every book about Laura Ingalls Wilder, every book inspired by Laura Ingalls Wilder. And I've now started on the Little House books again, and we're finishing up the last book the first 4 years. So we did our 506th, I think it was, reading the other day.
Wow.
Kept it up. Some days I was out. Some days I had other cast members read, but I kept it up. And then I found out about a marvelous thing called Stage It, where I was able to do my stand-up show from my living room in a live pay-per-view format. Then there were a couple online autograph shows. So everything, and I found out about Cameo, and now there's Memo out of Europe. So my whole life just kind of went onto the internet, and all my interviews became like this. Everything became through my phone and through my laptop that had been in person. So I just kind of continued to work. I managed to squeeze in a movie, September of 2020, went to Utah, and we were tested every other day, and our temperatures were taken all day, and we wore masks and stand over there. And by God, we shot a movie, and it got theatrical release, and I'm in a movie called Even in Dreams, which is now out on Blu-ray. And I did a bunch of stuff. And then The second I got vaccinated, went to an event in Missouri, and by fall of 2021, which my doctor said, he said, fall 2021. Yeah, maybe. And so September, I made it to New York, and October, I made it to France. And in August, right before that, my doctor said, you'll make September. You'll make New York in September. You'll probably get through France in October. November, December, and January, you might want to mark out as vacation.
Yeah.
I said, what are you saying? What are you saying? My doctor is very smart. So here we are again. Where everything's getting canceled because Omicron. I'm like, yeah, okay. So I guess I'm back in my living room on my computer, my phone. So yeah, we're very creative folk. My husband got declared an essential worker because he's building a thing at the airport with the thing in transportation. We're very clever and creative and lucky, and we managed to figure out how to do stuff without being in the same room with people. And we finagled and went under and over and are still alive and testing negative and have a roof over our heads.
Well, hey, I'm glad that you're doing well for yourself. You're healthy, and especially this entire industry that's been so plagued by this virus that we found ways to pivot and take a platform like Zoom, the two of us talking through the internet. Who would have thought 2 years ago if this like wouldn't even been a thing, right? And now it's like the forefront of everything.
And I've seen so much creativity. So many comedians I know started doing some really funny stuff out of their apartments and houses. Really funny stuff. 2 comics I know started doing a sketch thing, and it was called Two Old Queens Catching Up on the Phone. Really funny stuff. And the two of them, because they were able to be each in their own apartment and do this whole phone call where they're dishing and carrying. And people started doing some very clever things. There was some live stuff outdoors. I went to a thing around Halloween. It was the Stranger Things experience. It was in a parking garage. You drove your car in, and it was like a Broadway show on the roof of a parking garage, and it was a drive-in theater, and you got candy and popcorn and a thing and a program, and you never got out of the car, and there was a show. And I was like, well, if this is entertainment for a while, I could do this. This is good. So people got clever. I was very impressed with that. I tried to help out a bunch of my friends. I can't tell you how many people I bought a ring light for. And I wrote up instructions of how I did my show in the living room, like all the equipment, like where I got the cheap lighting and the backdrop and the thing, and found stuff and sent it to like all my friends who were doing stuff in their living room, going, here's where you get one of these and how you can set it up. And so we were all helping each other and stuff. I had a friend who was immune compromised. I did his laundry for a year because he didn't have laundry facilities in his building. So I drove over and picked up his clothes. So we just kind of did like, okay, who needs stuff? Does somebody need food? Does somebody out of, masks and Lysol? And we jump in the car and we did what we could.
Well, hey, I love that. And I think that's the true human resilience, right? We're all in this together, and we all have to help each other get through this because we all have to play our part, right? Or else it's just going to keep going and going. So here's hoping that hopefully sometime this year, things may get better or return to normal, but we all have to do our part in order for that to happen.
And it's true, as many people have brought up, I was like, well, we're all in the same, storm in this ocean, but, some of us are in a yacht or an ocean liner, and some are in a rowboat. And so, you get a checkup on your friends and like, go, so are you okay? Do you need anything? Because it's bananas. And so many of my friends are sick, and it's so we try to do what we can. We try to help our friends and make sure everybody's okay as best we can. And I think, that's helping us, get through it, is reaching out to other people and trying to connect in this world where we're being cut off from each other. And I was just saying, literally, your husband were talking, I said, my concerns about the future of the pandemic have less to do with the virus than with human nature. That if everyone get their act together, this could go really well. But
yeah. I hear ya. Yeah. So we'll see what happens. Alison, I'm so fascinated by your story. Like millions worldwide, I'm a big fan of Little House on the Prairie. This is one of the most generational shows that has ever been produced, where you have families that sat down and watched the show together. Now, what's so different about your journey is that you were thrusted into Hollywood and stardom as a child, pretty much. Before we deep dive into Little House on the Prairie, what were some of your early influences as a child, and what made you want to be in this medium?
Well, indeed, my family were all in show business. My parents met running a theater in Canada. I mean, all the way back. And in fact, my Auntie Marion was a concert soprano and married to a concert violinist. It's like everybody was on the stage or somewhere doing something. So I actually, until I was like 7, I thought everyone was on TV. Like people took it in turns. It was sort of that Andy Warhol famous for 15 minutes. I thought, oh yeah, everybody's on TV. Everybody I knew was on TV. So I thought it was kind of normal. And I started auditioning before I had any concept of what was even happening. So I was like flung into it. I had my SAG card by the time I was 5 and was working, which is weird because you don't really know what the heck's going on. I liked it though. And then as I got older and was more conscious of what the heck I was doing, I was like, oh yeah, no, this is good. And so by the time I got Little House, I was like 12. So I was like a teenager and I knew it was happening. I was like, yes, I was influenced by villains. It is crazy that I wound up being Nellie because even when I was a little kid, I loved I thought Vincent Price and all the Homer. I thought Vincent Price was like the greatest thing in the world. When I was really little, I watched, the TV broadcast of Peter Pan, the Broadway show with Mary Martin. And I thought Captain Hook was just like the most brilliant, funniest thing in the entire universe. So I did. I thought the villains in shows were like, oh, that's really good. So when I got hired to play a villain on this super goody show, I was like, yes. I took to it right away. So that kind of worked out.
Well, hey, speaking about villains, let's dive right into Little House on the Prairie. This is such a universal show that just happens to be set in this location of Walnut Grove. The themes of the show, such as love, friendship, kindness, helping others, those are all things we all strive to live a life of today. Although the show is largely based around the Ingalls family, there's this beautiful larger world of characters that inhabit this world, including yours. So, what was your introduction to this show, and specifically the character of Nellie Oleson?
Well, really, at the audition, I was so clueless. Entire generations of people, especially young women, read those books, except me. I had not read the books, and I remember I went to the first audition, as they say, a go see, where you come in and they say, "Well, we're going to be making a show of these books," and I was clueless. I hadn't read the books, and then I actually came in. I read for the part of Laura and the part of Mary, which is like no. And then they made the pilot. They did the show, and so I kind of went on and went, "Oh, that's done." And then they called me back, and I'm like, because I didn't realize it was a cast of thousands. And I get there and they give me the pages for this character of Nellie Oleson. Of course, I said, again, I'm clueless. I don't know. There's a villain, there's a Nellie Oleson. And I start reading it and she's so awful. And I'm 12. I'm sitting there with my dad and he's been with me in 1,000 auditions. And I said, this isn't a normal part. And he said, what are you talking about? I said, she's awful. She's a bitch. And my father looks and goes, what are you talking about? I start reading it for him. Of course, he cracks up laughing and he's like, okay, you read it exactly like that. In fact, don't practice it anymore. No, put the pages down. Don't look at them. Don't even look at them. You go and you read it exactly like that. Okay, what have I done? So I go in and there's Michael Landon and the producers, and I start reading this thing and they start laughing hysterically. And it was that my home speech where she's talking about how much everything costs in her house. They lost their minds and they say, could you do it again? And I said, well, yes, what do you want me to change? Little trained child actress. And they said, nothing, is read the thing about the house again. They wanted to see if it was like a fluke, and I did it. And of course I was hired on the spot. So I found out what Nellie Oleson was as I was being told that I was going to work on Tuesday. I was like, oh, I guess I'm doing this. And as soon as I read the whole script, I was just like, this is great. This is great. Because, you're a child actor, so many parts are, yes, mother, yes, father, where the children are all impossibly good. Those poor kids in Mary Poppins, like all those kids in movies and TV shows were like a little too good. Little House characters were more rounded. I mean, yes, Nellie was, vile, but even Laura disobeyed her parents all the time. She was always running away and not doing what she was supposed to and going, I don't know, Pa, I tried to do the right thing and I couldn't do it. Even Goody Mary, she set the barn on fire. People were real. Even the good people characters screwed up and had to like figure out how to fix it. And things went wrong and people died. And yeah, we shot it in the 70s and it's taken place in the 1870s, but Michael brought in plots where we dealt with drug addiction, racism, child abuse, everything, you name it, if it happened. And of course we had an episode called Quarantine and another called Plague. So yes, we dealt with this too.
Yeah, and it's so fascinating that you auditioned originally for Laura and Mary, and it's just this circle that just comes back. Now we can't think of anyone else that would play Nellie besides yourself or Laura besides Melissa, right? It's just things just fall into how they're supposed to.
Michael was really brilliant about the casting. He really oversaw that. We hear a lot about how with shows, the network suits the network. You have to pass network approval and the suits getting into it. And we had some of that on Little House, especially the later years. Well, see, that was a great thing. Initially, they didn't think it was going to be a hit. They were like, yeah, whatever. So they kind of let him get away with it. And then towards the end, people started to have, network approval. I never went before network approval. He just kind of went, ta-da. And in fact, the story is Karen Grassley played mom on the show. He initially hired her and they had to go, you can't hire her yet. She actually does ask for the network approval because he was ready to just go. And so he oversaw that and he would insist on certain people, even if the network said, well, we're not sure about it. He'd go, no, too late. I'm doing this. One of my favorite stories is Melissa Gilbert at her audition. She's so little, she's a little tiny girl. He had her go through the whole audition and he would ask kids like a random question to get their real personality because he knew that child actors were so taught to be polite and say the right thing. Right. So she's like getting ready to leave and he says, how tall are you? And she goes, and she's trying to remember how tall. She's like 8, trying to think of the answer to the question. And she, being a little kid, where you do your height against the doorway and your mom puts her. So she said, I'm this tall. Well, of course, he fell on the floor laughing. It's like this. He's like, yes, her. He hired her. And so it's like these kind of little spontaneous interactions. Michael would see something in someone. And that's why there were some people who were very, very experienced and had like guested on Bonanza. And then there were people who were out of nowhere who were like virtual unknowns on the show because he would see something that just go, yeah, I want this person. And even if the other producers of the network said, what are you talking? Who the heck is this? He go, shut up, I'm hiring them. And he saw there was a chemistry between these people he put together. It's very, very smart.
Now, I truly believe that the magic of Little House on the Prairie is all within the different relationships these characters in Walnut Grove have with each other. There's so many different dynamics that come into play, especially with your character. So let's start off with your TV family with Richard Bull, Jonathan Gilbert, and Catherine McGregor. What was your relationship with them? Because you can tell that you guys gelled so well together to create this sometimes dysfunctional family.
Absolutely. We did bond. I mean, just as Michael and Karen and the two Melissas had this bond and Melissa Gilbert and Michael had this very deep bond because, she lost her father quite young. So Michael and she developed very much a father-daughter relationship. Now my parents were still around. They were, I think I had the only parents who were alive and not divorced. And everybody was either adopted or had multiple step parents except me. But Catherine McGregor, crazy Mrs. Oleson, she did not have children of her own and was determined to be my mother. Sometimes we actually had to ask her to like rein it in because she did. It was like, where are you going? What are you wearing? What are you eating? Who are you dating? I was like, excuse what? She absolutely took on a motherly role, tried to boss me around. It was kind of hilarious, but it made her, she was so motherly. She was so much the mother. I mean, she wasn't mean like Mrs. Oleson, but she was absolutely eccentric and opinionated and cuckoo and loud like Mrs. Oleson, which was hilarious. She also was a woman of contradictions because on the one hand, she was very opinionated, very, but she also was a member of the Vedanta Society at the ashram and would go meet with her Swami at the ashram and was into Eastern meditation. And you kind of go, what? And yet,
just kind of flies over your head, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like what an odd thing to have. I mean, she gave me books when I was 15. She gave me the writings of Swami Vivekananda and meditation, its methods, and Cradle Tales of Hinduism. It's like gifts from Mrs. Oleson to Nellie. This is not what you would think. So she was a very interesting person. And then you had Richard Bull, who'd come out of the Goodland School in Chicago, and he'd been on all the shows from Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea to Gunsmoke, but he'd been on everything. And yeah, if you flip through the channels, you'll run into Richard Bull a lot. Our other person is Dabbs Greer, who played Reverend Alden. He's literally in everything ever made. I mean, he was in the Green Mile and he was in all these shows going back to Twilight Zone. So you can't not run into him on the TV. So we had these kind of people. So Richard was very experienced and he was really person most like his character. Richard was so Nels Oleson. He was very down to earth. He was very sensible, extremely intelligent, and he would think things through. So sometimes he and Catherine, who were friends, great friends, they were big buddies. And his wife had been in an acting class with Catherine in New York. I mean, they went all the way back. So they were enmeshed. And the two of them would get in an argument about issues of the day, and it would sound like Mrs. Olson and Mr. Olson, because he was always more thoughtful and pragmatic. And, well, no, Catherine, we have to think of these things. Well, I don't know. I just made up my mind. I did. And it's like, oh my God, it's the two of them. And they both took an interest in me. And Richard absolutely was very fatherly. And to the end, I remember meeting with him in Chicago before he moved to the retirement home. And he was so pleased that I had a business and was incorporated, was doing all the right things. And he said, I'm so glad you've grown up to be a good businesswoman. I was so worried you grow up to be a flibberty gibbet. Who says flibberty gibbet? Mr. Olson, maybe. And so they were very parental. And then Jonathan was very much my little brother. I mean, Jonathan was Melissa's real brother. That was Melissa Gilbert's brother. And here he's playing my brother. So that was very weird. And she found him to be annoying, as most young brothers are. So she would sometimes get sick of his questions and say, go ask Alison. She thinks you're funny. You go bother her. So he would come to me with stuff and ask about things because he didn't like to read the scripts. He knew all his lines. He just didn't read the rest of the script because, as he said, I like to be surprised when I see it on television, which is crazy, but he was serious. He would watch a show and be very excited. So he would always come to me and ask me, like, what's going on in the show? And then what happened? I'm like, why did you don't? Okay, fine. So he was the very strange, very smart, often tried to conceal the fact he was smart, much like Willie would do. Or as he said one day, I can't let them find out I'm smart. Did you see how much homework Melissa's getting? So he was actually a genius and played dumb and was behind in school because he was faking it. Strange little boy.
Well, of course, then just talking about Melissa, your relationship with Laura Ingalls, which is in many ways such like a backbone of the show. So what do you recall the most about your time acting alongside Melissa?
Well, Justin, like I said, the chemistry between these actors and in our case, here we were kids. And we had this comedic chemistry like immediately. And that was the thing is we hit it off right away. And I think it's because we were very much children of Hollywood. Melissa Sue, her parents weren't in show business and she had been acting since she was little, but she was like, her mother was trying to make her have a normal life. Whereas Melissa Gilbert and I, her family, her dad was the actor Paul Gilbert. Her grandfather was Harry Crane, the producer of The Honeymooners. I mean, it's like, so she was this like, again, Hollywood dynasty kind of thing. And so the two of us were like the 40-year-old midgets. We were like old Hollywood broads at, 10 and 12. And so we hit it off and we bonded. It was funny, I think, because we were playing enemies. If you're playing enemies, you very often characters in films and TV shows who mortal enemies become friends. Like there's something about that. It's like working out your issues with Bataka bats or something. I don't know. You beat each other up all day. It's all out of your system. Because we would be trying to kill each other all week. And then we'd have a slumber party at her house or mine on Saturday night. And we'd go for Slurpees to 7-Eleven after work. So we were great friends. And anyway, it's weird. We're still like sisters. She's, off in the other coast there in New York, but we text and tweet and Facebook and it's crazy. And it's almost 50 years. And someone asked me how many people from Little House do I have on speed dial on my phone 50 years later? And it's like 16. We're all still talking to each other. I literally was just emailing Dean Butler, Almanzo. I gave him a referral to the people who did our air conditioning and heat, and he just got like new heat put in. It's like we're having these kind of conversations like middle-aged people. You're saying, have you called the heating company? They're really good. But the idea that this many years later, Almanzo and Nellie are discussing air conditioner installations. Like, what? But this is literally, we're emailing last night, this morning.
Well, you can tell that the chemistry between all the characters, that it was natural and it was authentic. And I think that's one of the great things about this show. And I guess that's one of the reasons why you guys are all still so close, because you can tell you guys genuinely all enjoyed being around each other while making it. So as I mentioned up top, the show is so universal and one that's truly generational. And I'm proof of the worldwide appeal of the show. So my mom, she grew up in Pakistan, and when the show was airing, it was one of the only two English shows that played in the local TV station there. It was Little House on the Prairie and Star Trek. And she credits a lot of her, she credits a lot of her English development because of this show, and especially Nellie being one of her favorite characters. And then here I am, and I was growing up here in Canada. We watched the show together with my mom and my brothers. I can just imagine you hear stories like this so often. So, what is it about this show that resonates with a global audience?
So bananas. Okay, great. Now Pakistan, good. So another country that I can check on my list. Yes, the show very big in the Middle East. We were told that in fact, Little House on the Prairie was Saddam Hussein's favorite show. Who knew? It because in many Muslim countries there were only so many shows, Western shows they were going to have in, and a Little House. Well, if there was even in the strictest communities, well, we all had our sleeves down to the wrist and up to the neck. There were and it was moral values, and it was sort of eternal. It wasn't like modern American stuff that might be seen as threatening to anybody. So we were in places where they didn't show any other American shows. It was the thing. Now, the funny thing is that you had Little House and Star Trek. Who did I talk? Someone in Sri Lanka, they had Little House and Lost in Space. And I'm like, how confused was everyone? What is America? It's either the 1800s or the 30th,
Or the future, right?
3087. I don't know what's happening. It's like the future, that's the only thing you get. Little House is huge in other countries because people can relate. You have a family, doesn't have a lot of money. They're living in a small house with a lot of kids. There's a rich family in town who are always giving them a hard time. And they're not sure where their next meal is coming from. This is how most people are living. They're not living like Dallas and Dynasty and all those shows and Beverly Hills 90210. They're living like Little House in the Prairie. So the majority of humans on Earth, hello, this is, and we had the eternal themes of love and death and life. And so it really worked. But I have heard from Borneo. It's one of my favorite countries. I said, oh yeah, I grew up watching in Borneo. I have heard just about every, but that's fabulous. Now Pakistan and of course Canada, and I'm Canado American. I'm dual, and my father founded with my mother the Totem Theater in Vancouver, British Columbia, and my mother's from Vancouver, and my father's from Saskatchewan. So there you go, good Canadians. But it all does amaze me when I hear from countries where, okay, this is a bunch of blonde, blue-eyed white Americans in a covered wagon. What in the heck does this even mean? In some of these countries where people tell me, oh yeah, we watch it every day. I'm like, but how did it even make sense? They're like, well, because the stories were about real stuff that real human beings deal with. So hi. So we crossed, we did. And generationally, you're much too young to be watching the show, but you are. And we're on our 7th generation of viewers. We have the original people, the rerun people, the watched it after school people, the watched it in their college dorm people, the VHS generation, the DVD generation, the Blu-ray generation, and the now streaming on Amazon generation, the people who are watching it on their phone.
Yep.
I blown away by it every day, blown away. But none of these things, when we started the show, there wasn't even cable TV. We were like totally like, they're going to watch it on their phone, but there's phones with that. Never in a million, billion, trillion years could any of us from the show predicted that this is how it would be all these years later. No idea.
Now, I often speak to creatives about the life of an actor and how, in many ways, this is a paradox that people are sometimes so focused on what the next role is, they can't really even enjoy what the current role they're doing is. So, this being one of your very first roles as an actress, you've gone ahead and done so many various different successful projects. But as someone so young in the industry and as someone who is still finding themselves as a human being at that age, how did you feel when Little House was coming to an end?
Well, I was in a weird position because I left. And was it Melissa who left? I left, a bunch of people. Well, back in the day, contracts often ran for 7 years. And now I imagine actors now, what do they sign? A year, 2 years? You get a hitch?
Probably, I'm sure.
Signs a 7-year contract. And at the time, we thought the 7-year contract was good because the old studio system, all the way up until like the 50s, were signing people, for life for 20 years. And they finally said anything more than 7 years is practically indentured servitude and had to be illegal. So 7 years was as long as you could go. And that was considered a step forward. And so we had 7-year contracts, unheard of now. And I was signed to a full 7-year contract, pay to play, 7 out of 13 episodes. If they didn't use me 14 times in a year, they had to write me a check. So by God, they used me, that's for sure. So I was there, but when that 7th year hit and suddenly all these people's contracts were up, And sure, you might negotiate a raise a little bit here and there each year,
Sure.
but that's 7, all bets are off. It's you and the network going, well, I don't know. What do you think? And the network might say, well, thanks for playing. Or the actor might say, I've really decided to do something else. Or the network would come back with an offer, which back in those days, frankly, often wasn't very good. And people would say, well, yeah, I've been here 7 years,
Not
but I
bad.
don't get a raise. And it wasn't like being on Friends. It wasn't the kind of money that we hear about actors getting per episode now. That would be, people are making in an episode what we would make in a year and be like considered lucky to get. So it's just like unheard of, the numbers now. So I was also 19, and I had just, the whole difference between being under 18 and being over 18 with how many hours you can work and all the restrictions. So here I was just turning 19, just off this hit show, and, a cute blonde girl in the 80s. So it was like, hello, there's a lot of work I could be getting and things could be happening. And so obviously my management and everyone were like, duh, run like the wind if you can, unless they're going to pay a lot more money. And then they didn't really want to pay more money. Also, my character got nice, which, I love Percival. I love Steve Tracy, who played my husband, but it was getting a little dull. I was very nice. And I thought, well, unless something very exciting, unless they're going to do something crazy with my character or pay me more money. So I bailed, and I wound up, I stand up and dinner theater and traveling and doing all this other stuff, which was kind of cool. And Fantasy Island and Love Boat and all that. And they actually asked me back in season 9, which is crazy. They never do. You leave, they don't have you back. But on Little House on the
Right.
Prairie, you leave and see, then they go, oh, yeah, you want to come back for a guest star role? Okay. I did. But we didn't know it was going to end. It came as kind of a shock. I'd already left, so I was like, la, 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 la. But when they got word, it's like, that's it. We're doing 9 seat, the 9 seat. That was it. That was the last one. People were stunned. They thought they were coming back for a 10th. And then there was like, I think they found out like at the wrap party, some people found out very much the last minute. They had to have boxes of Kleenex passed out at the party because people were quite distraught.
So do you personally go back and watch any episodes of Little House on the Prairie, or if you're like flipping through the channels and you land on it, will you stay on it or will you just keep going forward?
Oh God, yes. No, I watch it. I got the DVDs and the Blu-rays. Yeah, I do watch it, and there's usually some holiday where there's a marathon, like Thanksgiving. I
Yeah,
tend to
yeah.
like the Twilight Zone marathon myself. It's my favorite, but there's always a Little House marathon. One of the running jokes is I'd have friends over and I'd go to base the turkey. I'd have the Twilight Zone marathon on. I'd go to base the turkey, and they'd all turn on Little House on the Prairie while I was out of the room. Like, I know you're watching it again. But there's certain episodes I just love. Absolutely. If I'm flipping channels, like, oh, it's this one, I will absolutely watch it. I've done commentary for the DVDs, one of the first sets they put out, and then they put out the French set, and actually did commentary for the French DVDs. So I wound up going back and like watching everything so that I could do the commentary. And there's favorite episodes that I've just seen a billion times. And I'll live tweet stuff. I need to do another live tweet, a rerun at some point for kicks.
Mm-hmm. Now, looking back at your journey on Little House on the Prairie, for you as an actress, what do you take away the most from your time on that show?
Oh, wow. I guess the work ethic, really, the work ethic. Michael had a really strong work ethic. I mean, he was absolutely first one there, lastly, because he was directing the show and writing the show and producing the show and
Right.
starring in the show. He's everything. So he was like, he was there. And we all had to, as they say, bring your A game and be, on the spot, even the littlest kids. I mean, I remember going to work at 4:00 in the morning. I was like, it didn't care how old you were, and you got to be in May at 4:00 in the morning. And so we did that. And we, luckily as minors, we had an 8-hour day plus lunch, and then they'd let us go. We had 3 hours school, but we'd get the crack of doom and we'd work the whole time. And we were held to a very high standard. We were treated amazingly with the same level of respect as the adult actors, which is very rare. We were expected not only to know our lines and show up and get on the stick, but there was a level of performance. When you watch the show, you go, oh, these little kids, some of the performances, we were expected to turn in an adult grade performance. There was no, sometimes with sitcoms, they would get lazy and kids would just kind of have a
Yeah.
catchphrase. And as long as they were cute, we
Mm-hmm.
could say that one line. No, Little House on the Prairie. It's like, no. You coming in method
Yeah.
acting and serious stuff. You had to do it. And if you didn't, you were gone. I mean, we used to joke like you could be killed in a buggy crash at any time. Uh, People died. People got written out. If you were on the set and it wasn't working or you were difficult, it's like, oh, look, they're not here anymore. So you knew that you had to be serious about it. There were no fooling around. There, whole story I tell in my book about the one of the assistant ADs, assistant directors, had a lot of the kids who were atmosphere and extras. He was handing out gum and candy at the end of the day. Hey, you kids were good and get gum and candy. And Michael made him stop. He said, I don't want you handing out candy and gum. And he said, why? He said, well, they're actors. They're not little trained animals. And it's degrading. He said, I don't want you giving them candy. He said, if their reward at the end of the day for being good is that they still have a job tomorrow and that they get paid. They're getting a paycheck. They're employees. They're not doing it for free. And he said, we don't hand out gum and candy at the end of the day for the grownups and pat them on the head. And I want them to do this, like, know that it's a job and not be thinking they're getting gum like a little dog getting a treat. And I don't think it's a good environment. I don't think it's a good precedent to set. And I was like, yeah, because as much as I enjoyed candy and gum, I thought I'm going to get treated with respect at like 13. Well, I'll take that over the crate of gum. Thanks.
Well, you nailed it there. It's rare, right? Because it's almost like you're treating kids as kids and not really treating them as professional actors. And you guys were professional actors. Whether it's your first role, your third or fifth, you guys are on set doing a job, right? And something you guys truly love to do. Now, I know we've touched up on a lot of Alison Arngrim, the actress, but I want to talk about Alison Arngrim, the person, and specifically your autobiography, Confessions of a Prairie, How I Survived Nellie Oleson and Learned to Love Being Hated. You speak in depth about your journey as an actress, your time on the show, the highs and the lows that come within this creative industry. There's so much to dissect just in that title itself. So
Yeah.
what did you learn the most about yourself as you reflected during the writing of the book?
Well, it was amazing because I think when it came out too was what amazed me is that people, they got it. Because I just, I put it all in there, as I say, everything and the kitchen sink. I told the truth and I covered so much. That was the amazing thing. I mean, the editing process is like bananas. When you do a book, they always say we need 70,000 words. I think I turned in 130,000 word document, and they were like, "You're crazy." So with the editor, it was like, okay, how do we cover all of these topics that you have brought in here, which we like, and we kind of want to get them all in and somehow put this in like book size. So it was quite a bit of work. I was amazed at how much we got in. I was amazed at what freedom they gave me. I mean, there were times where they went, yeah, can we change like this guy's name? Because we just don't want to hear from him. And there what was it? A teacher and the one guy, my friend's dad, who said he was high priest of the Church of Satan. They said, yeah, this guy sounds like a kook. We really don't want to hear from him. So there were people, we changed a couple things. And there were things like, oh, do you really want to say that way? Okay. But they didn't. I was amazed. There were things where I thought, well, they're going to say, you can't tell that story. And they went, that's a great story. Yes, you should tell that story. That is a good story. That is going in. I was like, all right. So I was amazed at how much freedom I was given. And then I was absolutely stunned when people, complete strangers, read it and said, I understand everything you just said. Oh, wow. Wait, I went through stuff like that. And the child abuse, and people went, that's exactly what it was like. Oh, you described it. I can't believe it. Were you at my house? How did you know this is and I was like, oh, wow, I've connected. I expressed it correctly and people understood they understood me. They understood what the heck I was trying to say. And they got it, which I think is probably rare for writers. You get lucky. I was very, very pleased. I think I knew that a lot of things, my experience, even though, yes, I was a child star and all this stuff, that many things about my experience were universal and did apply to an awful lot of people out there. And I found it like, yes, that was true. And they got it too. Definitely, I'm a survivor. I had notes written while I was writing it going, whatever it was then, it's funny now. It's like, pain plus time equals comedy. And I found out that's really true. I found out that the stories that you think are like, no one will be interested in this. I can't possibly tell that story. That's embarrassing. Those are usually the stories you should start with when you're writing a book. I tell people writing a book, I go, fine, what's the worst story you have that everyone has told you? God, don't tell that story. Start there. That's chapter 1.
How difficult is it to learn to love being hated?
It's so weird. Like I said, I had the advantage that I loved the villains. I had a thing about villains. So I knew it wasn't me they hated. I knew that Vincent Price, the great villain, was really a nice person. And Cyril Richard, who played Captain Hook, was actually a nice person. So I knew that people played villains. And I thought, what a cool thing to like go to work and like just say, so I had a good separation between fantasy and reality. And my mother was Casper the Friendly Ghost and Gumby and Sweet Polly, Purebred and Underdog and Davy Glide. And I knew my mother wasn't a talking ball of clay. I'd been with her at the studio. So I knew that those things were real and something were. And I knew that I was playing a character as being this other person. So when people said, you made me so angry, I hate you so much, I want to reach for the TV and slap you, I was like, thank you. Wow, this is an incredible compliment because I'm like this meek little creature. One of the greatest reviews of my book I ever read was someone read it and said, the girl who played Nellie was really a little scrappy fighting girl in cut off jean shorts with a Slurpee stained mouth. And I said, yeah,
I'll take it.
And so when I'm like scaring people, I went, this is kind of great. But it was weird because, you go into show business, people go into show business, I want to be loved. And I think it was hated. And then it did become difficult as a teenager and a young woman, finding people willing to date me. Couldn't date anybody who'd seen the show. They would get within 40 feet of me. So that was weird. And then is in my early 20s when you're trying to do the Hollywood thing. And I remember it was the 80s. And it was all like Charlie's Angels and sexy blondes. And you were, big boobs and blonde hair and big blue eyes. And I was a 20-something blonde chick. And so I physically, I walked into the audition. They went, yes, it's the cheerleader. And then I don't know, I opened my mouth. Every part I read from 81 to 84 was like you either had to be a cheerleader, naked, dead, or a combination of all three. And that was very difficult, but there was this sort of like non-threatening, really cute, sexy girl thing. And the image of Nellie was so strong that I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. They were like, well, we're afraid of you. And there were people who really had it in their heads. People in the industry thought it was real. Melissa Gilbert threw a party, and gosh, we're in our 40s, and we're standing around her kitchen, and this grown woman who's there says, it's so nice to see the two of you, getting along. And that, you guys made it. I'm like, Melissa and I are going, what is she
that was a
talking
TV
about?
show, right? It was like
We were, and Melissa said, oh God, was there some article in the Inquirer or something said we were fighting, but I can't keep track of it with TMZ. Who said that? And she said, well, when you were younger and you didn't like each other. And we went, oh my God, you mean like on the show? And Melissa had a fit. She's like, you work at Paramount. You're like in the industry. You thought it was real. What are we to do with ourselves? You're in the industry. You're married to a producer. You work at a studio and you watch a show and you thought we hated each other. You bought this story and you're like a grown person in the industry. So there were people who thought it was real. I had auditions where I'd show up and they were so surprised that I was nice. So that was a little weird. There were things I didn't get to read for because I was so typecast. Meeting people, I'm glad I kept a lot of my old friends. Making new friends was difficult because people were afraid of me. Luckily, I have a weird sense of humor, so I thought it was funny. I did understand that it was a gigantic compliment to whatever the heck I was doing as an actress there, that they bought it. But it was a little weird, and it's not what was expected of I'm going to go be in show business and I'm going to be fabulous and blonde and everyone will love me. It was like, okay, well, now what do I do? Luckily, thank God for comedy. So with stand-up, I was able to turn it around. And then with my stand-up, I was like, yes, fine. I know you all think I'm a bitch. Do you have any idea what I've had to put up with, you people? And turn it all on its head and turn it inside out and make it work. Take it and go, okay, this is what people think. Now I know. So, and then of course I like even this movie I did, Even in Dreams, like, okay, it's a villain. You want to do it? Yes, yes, I do. I'm a terrible person in Even Dreams. It's a lovely movie. Everyone's so nice. I'm awful. I'm just awful. I'm so objectionable. And that may be a thing. Maybe that's a gift I have for playing the incredibly objectionable human being. And I'm good with that.
Well, that's definitely a gift, and that's something you've just hit a home run out of the park with. So I am so happy for you that you continue to evolve and you continue to find different avenues within the arts to showcase your talent. So that's wonderful. As we wrap up with the great Alison Arngrim, it is now time for a segment I call the final act. Alison, I'm going to ask you 10 rapid fire questions about your likes, your dislikes, and I just want the first thing that pops into your mind. You up for it?
Okay.
Movies or TV shows?
Oh, movies or TV shows.
Yeah, what do you prefer watching more?
Which is which now? Remember when the Emmys were TV shows and the Oscars were movies, and now we have Oscar caliber films on HBO and Netflix, and now the TV networks that were just showing things are producing them, and series are 20 minutes long and movies are so like, are the things that I'm watching on my television movies or TV shows now? I'm not sure. I think I like TV shows. So, because some of the TV shows are really interesting, but now I don't know. I mean, I did all the Dune it was on my TV. I is it a movie or a TV show? I have no idea anymore. TV shows are now like movies, and movies are now like TV. It's yes.
All right. Theater or watch at home?
Ooh, theater. I
All
guess
right.
we got to get a handle on this damn disease so we can really fully go about it. We got some theater in. I got to see some people's shows. I went to a play outdoors. I have been able to did my stand-up briefly in New York and France there. God, I love theater. I love doing theater. I love watching theater. So yeah, we need to clean this mess up so we can all just shove ourselves back in a theater on Broadway.
Favorite movie?
Silence of the Lambs. Oddly, I love the performance by Anthony Hopkins. Is just like I said, greatest villain of all time. Love that one. Love that one. I mean, I love Harold and Maude. I love a bunch of really great old movies, but I have to admit, Silence of the Lambs. I will always go back and watch that.
All right. Favorite TV show not named Little House on the Prairie?
Crazy for Star Trek Discovery. We've been watching a ton of that right now. Mad for that. Love The Mandalorian. Love Stranger Things. Wow, there's so many. There's so much like really good TV now. I guess I really loved 6 Feet Under. That was one of the first of these kind of really new series, and I really love that show. And currently, I'm a Stranger Things freak. I have the T-shirt. I have all the props and gigas. I bought all the merchandise. Went to the thing. But right now, we're hooked on to Star Trek Discovery.
All right. Summer or fall?
Fall. Hate summer. I hate summer. I go out in the sun. I burst into flames. I don't get a tan. Look at Bailey. I'm Scottish Irish heritage. I catch on fire if I try to get any sun. It's no terror. I like fall. I don't like the heat. I like the cooling temperatures and the leaves turning. And I'm mad for Halloween and Thanksgiving. Fall all the way.
Does pineapple belong on pizza?
Absolutely not. And I say this as a Canado-American because Canadians invented the Hawaiian pizza with the Canadian bacon and the pineapple. It started in Canada because I was eating it in Edmonton in 1981, 82.
Bam. There we go.
Bad then.
Favorite character in Little House on the Prairie?
Nellie Oleson, closely followed by Mrs. Oleson.
There we go. Favorite episode of Little House on the Prairie?
Bunny, the one where I go down the hill in the wheelchair.
You answered this a little earlier, but who do you keep in touch with the most till this day?
Charlotte Stewart, Miss Beadle. Yeah. Baby Carrie, Melissa Gilbert, not somewhere in there. Yeah. Dean Butler. But Dean and I did a thing in just last year in South Dakota. And we've been talking a lot lately. Like I said, I just passed them on to the people who did my heat and air conditioning. So I've been talking to Dean Butler Almanzo a lot. He's been joining me for some of the Little House readings. He read The Long Winter and These Happy Golden Years where Lord Almanzo get married. So we had him do those readings. So I would say weirdly Dean Butler right now, but I'm very tight also with Miss Beadle, Charlotte Stewart.
Nice. And lastly, describe your experience on Little House on the Prairie in one word.
Transformational.
Bam. You killed it at that, Alison. And I love your insight on all of that. You're great. Thank you so much for being a guest on the show today. And thank you for your contributions to the creative arts. Little House on the Prairie holds a very special place in my family, and you play a big part in creating the love that we have for it. I truly wish you all the best, and I appreciate you being on the show today.
I thank you as an American and a Canadian and as an international celebrity. I thank you and all of the countries you are associated with.